We're not there yet.
We're
Jump
done.
in the Okay, just hold on. Just hold on. Let's just get through this one. If we're missing something in the.
You want to move to the next meeting?
So, do you want to vote on the consent agenda?
Yeah, so I was trying to get I was asking for Dick's vote because. Yeah.
I waved my hand up. Maybe you thought it was frustration.
I didn't see it, okay. Fine, so that's unanimous. Consent agenda. So the next item of business is the Vermont child care payroll tax.
I would make a motion that we absorb the entire increase to the payroll tax that takes effect on July 1.
Okay, motion by Julie. Do we have a second? Second. Dick's getting in there in a hurry now. Okay. Ellen is just, Randy's done her homework on this one, where I was just kind of curious about what districts were doing around the state. So she talked to a bunch of superintendents?
I did. I was in a meeting. Jim had asked, if we're gonna absorb the entire cost, is that typical of what other districts are doing? I was with superintendents last week and I connected with about 15 superintendents who were all doing this. VCSEA, I reached out to Sue Sklowski and to Jeff Francis from VSA to see if they had any sense of what people were doing, and they did not. So I connected with some colleagues.
Because the amounts are relatively small, I think it's unfair to add an unexpected quarter. Actually, it's 0.11% of every dollar that they're paid. I don't think that's fair.
Well, I actually agree that we should absorb the entire amount. I think at the same time, the state of Vermont made a choice as to how to put this in place. It's a benefit for people. I think with our teachers, I don't want to layer that on top of them, but my guess is that most employers are going to be adding it to the bill. Yeah.
I would just ask that in your motion, you use the language that
Yes.
I've got in that second paragraph at this time, because this is a new tax from the state, which, as we know, can grow and change as we move forward. It may become something where we're willing to absorb 25% of 0.44 now, but maybe not an additional 2% in 5 years. And so it may be something we want to talk about in the future. So I think we should word it appropriately now, so we're sticking to just this.
For the next, as a seconder, I would accept the amendment that we add language that references that for this year, the entire child care tax from July.
Well, I don't know if we will take this year because this is a continuing tax. We
Understand
have
that.
to vote on it every year.
No. You asked for a non-precedent setting.
Right.
If they change the tax, then we want to revisit it.
Right.
I could, just Julie, is the second sentence, is that your motion as amended?
Absorb the entire
BRSU
tax.
I'm sorry, I was talking the whole time with my microphone off. I amend my motion to reflect that we would like to absorb the entire tax at this time.
Great. Thank you. And you're good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Great. Now the next one, we do need the motion language to be read specifically.
Do you mind if I interrupt you for 1
You may.
second? Just because I know, Jesse, I believe this is your first meeting, and I believe I know why you're here, and because often people don't realize quite what just happened, I do want to let you know that your hire was just approved through the consent agenda by the BRSU board, so congratulations and welcome to the BRSU. So I just wanted to let you know that, so you could leave and know that, or you can feel free to stay, but I do not want to leave you hanging there, so, okay?
I appreciate that very much. Thank you all.
Great. So on to the tax exempt lease.
I hereby move the board approve the proposed tax exempt lease with MST Government Leasing, LLC, for the purposes of refinancing and funding photocopy equipment leases, including consultant fees and related costs, issuances of such leases in an amount not to exceed $140,830.33 per section 104.830.33, and an interest rate of 5.94% per year through August 1st, 2028.
Is there a second to that motion? Julie? Okay, sounds like we're once again lowering our costs effectively.
Oh, effectively, yeah, I mean, it's right around where I thought it was gonna land. So, SBC goes out to bid and people are competitive. We're not paying an arm and a leg for copiers that they do take care of. We are paying them fees, but they do take care of everything. We have to be there for setup, but they're our go-between with the vendor, and so it works well. It will.
It's a little surprising for the meeting tax rate. It's kind of 6%.
Say that again, the
tax exempt, interest rate.
Oh, the interest rate, yes, yeah. Interest rates are definitely going up for borrowing, without a doubt. But they're good on the other end, Jim.
Okay, any other discussion questions? If not, then all in favor of that motion as presented, please raise your hands. That is unanimous. Next one, yep.
The motion to authorize the superintendent to execute and deliver the tax exempt lease. I hereby move the board authorizes the superintendent to execute and deliver the tax exempt lease with MST Government Leasing LLC on such terms and conditions discussed and provided to the board, and to execute and deliver any such documents required to execute the contract with the Specialized Purchasing Consultants, Inc.
Do we have a second, Julie? Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. This is a really easy meeting today.
They write it all out for you.
So far. So far.
Move to approve the revised personnel benefits.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Alex?
Good.
Okay, I think Sue's gonna walk us through?
Sure. So the gist of what's in here is an attempt to, well, it is a match to what we negotiated in the staff agreement. So there were some changes in the staff agreement with respect to mostly personal and sick leave. And we wanted to mimic what was happening there to make sort of streamline what we're processing for staff in the same sort of categories across the board. So BRSU support staff are not included in staff agreement because they never asked to join, they never voted to join, so they are covered under these personnel provisions. And then we have some other staff that are covered under the personnel provisions. All of our staff in the central office are covered under it, and also some positions out in the field that are excluded from the staff agreement. Most of those positions are year-round full-time positions, like lead custodians, the assistants to the principals, and we also have our kitchen managers. And the reason why these positions are excluded from the staff agreement is because they are confidential in nature. They deal with supervision of other staff members. So the personnel benefits covers a wide range of people, and we wanted what was in the staff agreement to tie out to what's in the personnel benefits. So that's mainly the difference. You're going to see the sick hours change under category C and what we're calling D1 and D2, because those hours for those same categories of employment in the staff agreement were increased. So we've changed them here. Personnel leave, the same thing. We increased personnel leave in category C and D under the staff agreement, so we have increased it here under the personnel benefits. We did some clarifiers in the language, but the intent of nothing else on this page has changed. If you go to page 2, you'll see a chart right in the middle that talks about the percentage contribution for health premiums. And this is what we have been doing all along. It is also verbatim from the staff agreement, but we didn't have it included in the personnel benefit, so we're just adding some clarity where we can. The other couple of changes, if you look down below on that page, number 4 and number 5, where we talk about additional personal days, and we talk about in lieu of insurance. Again, these mimic the staff agreement, and specifically with the in lieu of insurance, we made a change in the staff agreement, making the in lieu of insurance an annual payment. So if somebody doesn't take medical and dental, they're entitled to an amount of money in lieu of taking that insurance. And instead of just paying it out every quarter, what we said to people in the staff agreement is you need to fulfill your work expectation. You work for us for the whole calendar year. We have a little bit of wiggle room there. And if you don't fulfill your work expectation, if you just decide you're not going to work for a couple weeks during the year, then you're not entitled to this benefit. So we're adding that to the personnel benefits as well.
It's all on arrears on an annual basis.
Yep.
David is very familiar with this, since he negotiated the staff agreement.
Yeah, okay. And I approve.
Me too.
You're very familiar with it also.
So we're.
And Julie was not familiar with it.
Not the staff, no.
And Antonio, but
Right.
Anthony.
So this, at this point, this is essentially, we budgeted on the basis of this, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a financial change, I wouldn't say there's too much of a difference, because even though there's some additional sick leave offered here, which matches what's in the agreement, we were, prior to this, providing some additional leave in order to get people through the year. We've been doing that since COVID, right? So now this sort of throws all that away. There is no more additional leave, and this is the leave you're gonna get. It's a little bit more than it was before, but this is what we're sticking to.
Is there's a sick bank too?
There is not a bank for this staff, but we have been acting as if there was, because we're trying to provide the same benefit that the staff are getting under the agreement. And because there was such a high need for it. We've been slowly trickling it down. It's much, much less this year than it has been in past years. Every year it gets a little better, We're still coming out of COVID. That's what it feels like. But we're getting there.
We did agree that we would cover sick bank needs use the same standards.
Yeah, so the sick bank under the staff agreement has gone back to the old language, which is very specific. You have to be under the care of a physician and have a medical condition. It's not, I had to stay home with my kid because they had a virus for 2 days, which is what we have been doing right now. That's how we've been operating now, but we won't be operating that way in the future, either here or under the staff agreement. So as far as the cost goes, really the only difference is really that additional leave.
And that's understood by people.
Well, we're getting the word out, and we're going to continue to get the word out. People have a hard time holding on to this information. They only seem to really be interested in it is on the day that it happens to pertain to them and they ran out of leave. So we try to put this information out all the time to remind people, and we'll do it. We've told them once, we will tell them again before school starts, and I try to do reminders periodically throughout the year.
I think we negotiated with the union, staff union, that they would reach out even though that group is not part of the union, to remind them that they're now operating under the same rules. They don't have to do it, but as long as they're publicizing it to their union, it's just a matter of a couple more emails.
Yeah.
As Dick pointed out, we did negotiate this, and took me a few minutes to ratchet into what Sue was saying. Seeing it written down is different from what we talked about. But I think what's useful to know is I trust that it's written down the way we'd intended, but I think what's useful to know is they came to us with some complaints about how the leave thing worked, and the fact that people would there's a small percentage that take advantage of leave, and then if they run out of leave, they just say, just don't pay me. And so that sounds great on paper, but it's a complex it adds real stress to the people who are working, who now have to cover and do extra hours, and their whole day and their whole planning gets disrupted. So this is all an effort to try to find a way to get everyone to collectively say, okay, we're meeting you halfway, but you have to meet us halfway. If you're gonna take this job, you have to be committed to doing it and to being, fulfilling your contractual obligations. And it's not just, well, it doesn't matter, I just won't show, you just don't pay me. That's why we have the hook of not, of having the increases after a year or two, but if you didn't fulfill your obligation, you don't get the increase. So everyone in principle agreed with that. And there may be some people that will be, that will be upset by it, where my meandering around is getting to a point where I think you're absolutely right. I think the more we get people to understand that this is really geared to pat the back and thank 95% of our staff, and that this is meant to be an affirmation of the commitment that they've shown over the years. And
It's also not something we're imposing down, it's actually something that's being requested by your coworkers.
It was collectively negotiated, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Dean, welcome.
So Rico.
Enrico. Hey, guys. Welcome on board. We're rocketing through our meeting here, actually. Okay, so we've still open. We had a motion to approve the updated personnel benefits. And a second. Is there any further discussion questions on those? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the update to personnel benefits, please raise your hand or say something. Aye. Rico?
Aye. Aye.
Good deal.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, so we are unanimous on that.
Okay. Sorry, I can't get my camera to work. It sounds like the audio is working, so at least I got that.
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. So now we're on to the monthly update from the superintendent.
Yep, so, I mean, it's a distribution because we've talked about it at the other meetings already this month. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I do have a typo for, under the Director of Facilities, it's Adam Bassett. So I apologize for that error. And he started last week, and we're going really positively. He and Greg are working together. And from everything I can tell, it's been good so far. I will also invite everyone to a special meeting for Taconic and Green next week. It's on Tuesday night here in this room at 6:30 to review the facility review docs from the evaluations we had done of the 5 Taconic and Green schools. So if anybody would like to come and listen, hear what they have to say, please come.
Since I want to acknowledge that, you know, okay, I'll go forward.
Go ahead.
I wondered, since Greg has worked for us for so long, is there a plan that this board and other boards might facilitate with a special gift or honorarium?
Sure. You've done, you know, a variety of things in the past. I'm happy to kind of talk to Jim through that. We are still working through goodbye for him. So I'm happy to share it with the BRSU board once we have the details about that as well.
It's the classic, it sounds great, but also then who do we do it for, when, and, you know, we've had other people left and.
Yep.
That we could have,
Done the same
taken a
thing.
poll, and, you know, stuff like that, but you know, it's nice. It'd be nice to have, it would be nice for us to have something just sort of a standard thank you.
Right.
I think that's a nice idea.
Why don't we talk through it and,
Sure.
and then we will come up with something, okay?
Okay. I also want to point out it's really kind of neat what Randy's doing with the National Superintendent Certification Program. This is, you know, a big commitment on the part of Randy to go through, you know, it's a lot of work to go through this whole process to get the national certification, but you know, I think we're all pretty pleased with the superintendent we have now, and if he wants to keep on improving, it's supporting her in that endeavor. Seems like a smart thing, so we'll all recognize and
Thank you.
support her with that effort.
Well, should we be nervous?
Yes. They're gonna discover how good it is.
Will it raise
They
our
already know.
profile?
They're gonna discover it, and then she's gonna take Sue, and we're out the creek without
Yeah,
power.
well, we're gonna do a long-term improvement on it, with Randy. We tried to make it as long as we could.
I think Randy continues to be pleased with her work here.
Yeah, it's a great place to work, for sure.
Also thought maybe, you know, you had, and Secretary Saunders has been a hot button topic in Montpelier and all. It was, you know, Randy had the opportunity, it was nice that she was actually here. We also, at the last VSBA meeting, we started the meeting with about a half an hour with interim Secretary Saunders. It's obviously been sort of a rocky road. But I think, you know, she's in the role, and I think Randy had some very positive feedback following that meeting too, when you reached out to her.
Oh, yeah, well, I was referring to the letter that she had written. I had requested that, I had advocated for the fact that there were many districts across the state whose budgets had not passed, and that many of those districts were very low spending and had already gone 2-3 times to their communities, and that, I felt like it was important that she speak out about that, that maybe the governor clarify some of his comments, because there are many people in those communities who did not pass budgets, who were now not trusting and questioning their district superintendent at times, saying that they weren't being honest because the governor said that their taxes were gonna go up by X number of cents. And the governor did not do that, but she did write a letter, and I felt like she had heard the concerns, not just from me, although I was pretty vocal about it, but from other people as well. And I appreciated her writing a letter that was public to communicate that these are districts that are not having significant increases. And some of them, they're amongst the lowest in the state for spending, and even have a decrease in their tax rate, and people are still not voting for it. So anyway, I appreciate that she did that.
She also committed to, and this is something at the VSBA meeting, I opened my big draft and kind of brought up a point that she also covered, which is, and I said, yeah, okay, you're there. The VSBA was kind of negative on her, and there was been a lot of negativity. So I made the point that, okay, you know, she's there. It's really important as you're moving forward on looking at the education system and what's going to have to change and all. The key thing is to keep all the people in the trenches as a part of the process. So if you've got the VSBA, BSA, ASBO, you've got, you know, all these different organizations representing people in the education community around the state. And, you know, the legislature, some people in the legislature were thinking they would fix all the problems, and made the point kind of clearly, you know, try to make the point to her that, you know, it's really, you've got to include the full education community in coming up with solutions, or else it's probably going to be a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And her letter was pretty clear on stating as well. So I've been, you know, she's gotten a lot of grief, and there are a lot of people who, you know, We're still writing unpleasant letters and stuff like that. She's there for the time being as the interim secretary. She's going to be around for a little while. So I think it's, you know, you make the most of what the situation is. And at least I think she's shown a willingness to listen and act as if she's going to work with people. So, yeah.
I think that opening up the process and making it much more transparent and more inclusive are both things that absolutely need to happen. And that's largely in the control of the governor more than anybody else.
Well, I think, you know, if you look at, you know, we'll touch on the legislative report, but the yield, which we're actually coming up on next anyway.
Yeah.
The you know, the big item was the yield bill, which is usually just here are the numbers and everybody approves, you know, for the numbers for taxes that you need to raise enough money to pay for education spending. And this year, the legislature started off by trying to say, oh, by the way, we'll also do a total rehaul of the legislative funding system and probably education in Vermont in this bill. And we'll pass it by next week. And that got a lot of pushback, a really strong pushback from us. The T&G approved writing a letter that ended up it was sent to specific legislators instead of to everybody. We got a lot of pushback at the VSBA and other organizations, and they finally backed off to essentially creating a couple of different entities. You know, what it was, they got a heavy duty pushback when, you know, first they were going to set up a big committee, including everybody, to look at the issue over the next year and try to come up with solutions. They also were coming up with a smaller group that just was there to inform and keep the legislators themselves aware of what's going on in education so they're not all trying to do their own homework on what to do, but they'd have a resource. So that big group that was including, you know, everybody, that sounded like a pretty good approach that we were pushing for. Then the Senate Finance Committee said, oh, let's add a little something that says that committee will start work a year later. And in the meantime, just like, you know, 6 of us legislators will get together and come up with a solution, which scared the heck out of everybody. And they finally pushed that back. But we do know that there's going to be a significant effort taking place over the next year with input from a lot of different organizations. I think we've tried to provide more useful input to the process as a district than a lot of districts do. I think we're going to have that as a job next year too, to try to stay on top of what the directions that they're going. They're talking about bringing in an outside consultant. One thing I've said is they always go for the same consultant that always has the same answer, and just at least change that. So I think we're going to be advocating next year. Next year is going to very likely, just from the overall legislative perspective, one, they're going to be looking at serious changes in education and education funding. I think, as Dick said, on the ed funding side, we really do need to make some serious changes because it's just such a mess right now and nobody can understand it. And we had this year when, financial decisions at the district level were not being reflected in what districts were paying, and that turned into an utter disaster. So I think there does need to be some serious work on that front. And so I think, we should be prepared to be up to date on that and to provide, our best thinking, to discuss it in our board meetings and our best thinking and try to figure out how we can impact that whole situation. I think also this year, because finance was such a disaster, there were a lot of people waiting in the wings at the beginning of this legislative session to go whole hog on the independent school issue. And that totally went away because there were bigger issues. That is very likely to come back next year. Hopefully it gets crowded out by this commission to redo, education or something. But I don't think we can count on it, so we have to be, aware of the fact that we may once again see a big push to impact independent schools. There was one particular, to the yield bill, there was one particular amendment that we fought tooth and nail and really were very noisy about, which was presented by, this is Rebecca Holcomb, former education secretary, a representative now, and presented this as a technical fix, which would be on the way students are weighted. For anybody, for any district that was sending tuitioning kids outside of the district, they were like, oh, you don't get most of the weights on those kids. That would have had a dramatic impact on our districts. Essentially, the TNG would have been the best off, only losing about 4% of our kids. Meadowy would lose about 8% of our kids. And Winhall would lose almost 18% of their kids with that new weighting structure. It was presented as just a technical amendment, and it was presented like 6 times. It just wouldn't die. So, but finally it did die. So, I think we have our work cut out for us next year. Once again, on a couple of fronts. Questions, thoughts?
That it seems to me we also have to include critical funds for reconstruction of most of the schools in the state, and the fact that local property tax can't absorb that at this particular point. We also have to considerably challenge the number of mandates that the legislature passes on with zero funding to the districts, which drive all sorts of stuff.
That part is part of the study.
Oh, good. And then we need to have much clearer direction with respect to the statewide health care negotiation and costs. Because if we go back to the way it was around here, we paid much less.
Yeah, that's one thing to recognize. I'm actually the treasurer of the BSBA, so I pushed on this year, the healthcare negotiations. We were going into another statewide healthcare negotiation year, and both sides said, okay, let's put it off for a couple of years. Let's live with what we have for the next couple of years. And that, to some extent, everybody agreed to that. There was concern about, essentially what's happened every time is the employer commissioners have gotten their heads handed to them in negotiations in the end. What we did this year, the VSBA actually puts all the people on the employer commissioner team together and then provides financial support to them. This is a non-negotiating year, so normally the funds for that, the employer commissioners would go down. We actually increased those dollars for the employer commissioners. The thought is that, we have an off year and now's the time to actually start working on potentially making any legislative changes to the negotiating process, coming up with additional, information. Now's the time. We have a bit of a, we're not going to be negotiating, but we should be advocating like crazy for over the next year. So that's a direction. That's the effort going on there. Sue Zaglaski is 100% behind that, and the USBA just approved a budget that supports that. So
We also need to be particularly careful who is the next chair of the Senate Education Committee. We've had a champion, and today it was announced that he's not running for re-election. So,
and his vice chair on that committee was not very friendly to us.
yeah.
So that will be important. Yeah.
On the healthcare issue, is there any thought as to where where they want to go, when they have a year, they have a window of opportunity to come up with a plan of another way of doing things that might either be more cost effective or, do they know what their goals are? And
On
do
the
they have an idea?
legislative front, yes. And that, that was, we fought for that about 4 years ago, and then we're still asking for the same things we were asking for several years ago.
Which is
one, changing it from a winner takes all system. In addition, changing the process enough so that there is actual more negotiation during the process instead of just waiting to go to the final, single best offer arbitration. That's the main thing.
There's a conversation of reviewing the plans on offer too, isn't there?
Yeah, I think, well, I think every year, well, I don't know all the details there.
I think I've heard, there's been a lot of conversation of the fact that the 4 plans that were our new plans, 12 years ago or whatever, which moved away from, I don't remember what they were called anymore, but we went to including the CDHP so that people could have HSAs. And those plans were supposed to provide the benefit of putting more burden on the employee, therefore they wouldn't use as much and the rates would stay down, and that obviously didn't happen, and the state contract made it even worse because it required us all to have HRAs this way, which just has made the rates continue to skyrocket, and the whole idea of us having these 4 plans on offer really doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, and we still, even though we try to educate people, see people choose plans that is more money out of their pocket for no greater benefit. And no matter how many times you try to explain that to somebody, they don't understand because they see the word platinum and they just think that's the best.
Right.
And so they pay more money for something. And again, having 4 plans on offer makes it more complicated for just any employee coming in. I don't know what to choose. Tell me what to choose.
Well, I think one of the biggest parts of, where we're trying to change the design is to actually have a little bit more, not a lot of skin, but a little bit more skin in the game earlier.
Yeah.
And that's, it was you had a lot of it, you had, there was no money out of pocket for employees until you had a very, very substantial amount of spending.
There is none, yeah.
And so the thought
It's all
was,
for
okay,
salary.
let's in the end, let's, make up for that later, but have something where they're, kicking in some portion, of the costs in the
Initially, yeah.
first $1,000 or something,
You just have to be cognizant of what the burden that puts on us administratively. Because that is,
Yeah.
it really complicates things. It will make the currently complicated system even more complicated. I'm not against it because I agree with what you're saying and I think it helps keep healthcare costs down, but,
Yeah.
but they have to be.
I think that's one reason, as the BSBA, since the BSBA is funding the employer commissioner's efforts.
Yeah.
So the thought, part of it was to probably provide enough funds to hire, some sort of lobbying concern and also some folks to help with design of the program.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially a bunch of that money, you're not going to be, what you're spending it on is experts to support the work of the employer commissioner.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions, and that is related to this. So that is, are HSAs still seen as a useful tool for that, even though it's not popular?
No, not really. It's only in conjunction with the silver CDHP plan, which is such a high deductible out-of-pocket max plan that to choose that plan, it varied. I mean, literally probably 5 people on that plan. And
well, my point is, if they
shift that over,
if they realize that HSAs really are a way that could help everybody, even though they've got a bad rap. So that was my first question.
Yeah.
Do they have a bad rap that's not fair or not correct? Or do HSAs work? And if they do, maybe that should be allowed without the high deductible. I mean, it was set out to fail. right?
It totally was. We were the
Right.
poster child for HSA
We were
succeeding.
the poster
It
child.
wasn't just us that liked it, the teachers liked it too. I can't tell you how many people, when we moved to the state contract, Mr. HSA, can't we have our HSA back? It did both things. It allowed people to save, the employer helped with that, and it made them feel as if it was their money. They wanted to keep that money in the bank.
Right,
So they thought about spending it before they went to the doctor, which helps keep the premiums down. I don't think it has a bad rap. I think it just isn't utilized anymore because there isn't a good way to do it.
well, there isn't a good way to do it because of the way that negotiation
Right,
has gone.
exactly.
They purposely defang, you know.
Thinking they were doing what was in the best interest of the employees, which they really weren't, but that's what they were thinking. Because it's easy. First dollar HRAs are so easy.
I would love for you to push that back again, even though they'll probably say, you know, they'll probably discard it right from the get-go, but.
Well, but that's, you know, if you can, maybe you could put together an education, you know, I don't know how it's gonna work out. One real positive thing is for multiple years, the VI and Visit boards themselves were totally dysfunctional. And that was because of the two most senior people on each side. And there was an agreement between them that, okay, I'll leave if you leave. And so those two members of the board left, and now it's become a somewhat more functional board. So we could see some, you know, some positive direction because of that.
You know, your point of you started to say the same, I don't know if you backed off intentionally, but I'm gonna lean into what you're starting to say, Jim. Because I think, I do agree that the system that you renegotiated here, that all of you did before I got here with HSAs for our teachers, what was positive. I never heard anything negative, not nearly the number of complaints I've heard since the shift to HRAs. So I wonder if when there are negotiations opened up, whether there's a space for the teacher, you know, teachers in our system and board members, business to sort of do a presentation in which you've got folks on both sides of the negotiation agreeing on something that worked well. I mean, we've got nothing to lose.
Right.
And I think it's potentially an
Actually,
interesting approach.
You know, again, using our district
Yeah.
as, here's an example where a whole bunch
It
of
was a
teachers here
win-win-win.
will tell you that this was a real mistake.
Yeah, I mean, anyway,
And-
just,
Well, we know who was the head of the committee on the other side, you know, the teacher side. He's still a teacher at Meadow. He just isn't on the negotiating team anymore. I bet you could get him, and I would certainly be willing to participate in that.
it's something to think about.
Well, that's something that definitely, the guy who's heading up the employer commissioners, Mark Koenig, he's pretty good, smart guy. So I think, you know, giving them some, and there are other really good people on that employer commissioner group. So I think, you know, we should be feeding them some thoughts like that.
Okay,
Great.
But are we in the second year of our teacher contract or the third year? I believe we're in the second,
We're going into the second.
yeah.
going in.
This is
finished
year
our first.
one of the last round.
Well, the reason I asked is that usually before the third year is halfway through, we're in the business of negotiating. If something is not done about property tax, given the 13.5% yield that was settled on, whether or not the governor approves it is a different thing. If the property tax continues to go up at that rate, we're going to get reactions to many districts that can't afford it. And as a result of the fact that our staff, our teachers are what, 65 to 70% of our total budget. If we don't get the healthcare solved, if we don't get this funding for education solved, we're gonna enter into negotiations with teachers with chaos funded by property taxes that will probably end up failing. We put in 4.5% as our total increase, now increased because of the yield business that we have no control over, because of healthcare that we have no unfunded mandates. And I've already heard that when they get the tax bills out, people are gonna be shocked. They voted trusting our superintendent and our opinion that this is what we need to educate.
Yeah.
And that ain't gonna be the rate.
Well, I think it'll be, one, just for the fun of it, one of my favorite numbers or sort of ideas that come out of all this in recent times is this year we had a disaster because there was a lot of additional education spending. We're talking about initially came out at 240 to 250 million increase in education spending. And that's backed off, a decent amount, but not as much as it might have. I got a list that I could share with people from, this was an attempt at, here are the unfunded mandates, and it includes things like universal school meals. And it's the unfunded mandates of recent times and how much they added to education spending. And it was pretty close to that $250 million in the end. So it's kind of scary, the amount that, that I think that's a point that really needs to be made to the, this is, this year we had a perfect storm problem that was a lot, the rhetoric going into budgeting was a big problem. That from the administration and from the legislature. And a big part of the reason for the big increase in initial budgets was because of that stupid 5% cap problem that made everybody think they could spend money. So those were all things, that's essentially, that was Montpelier, setting up a really bad situation. And now they're like, oh, we have to fix what you guys have, they're looking at us and saying we have to fix what you guys screwed up. And, I think we need to continue to remind them that not only was this year's situation not directly, of course, we're the guys coming up with budgets, yes, but, the environment you set up was problematic due to your decisions. But also just that point that Dick was making, that plus, the unfunded mandates, these are real dollars. I mean, these are serious amounts.
Right.
When they end up, when talking, David and I are the only ones kind of saying, maybe the universal school at the VSBA, the universal school meals, maybe not, maybe isn't the best way to handle this.
We voted against it, and they asked us why we voted against it. Why were we such terrible people?
Yeah, because you don't want to feed the kids.
And the initial, at that point, the estimate was that it was gonna cost like, $40 million or something a year. And then when I bring it up there, it's like, oh, but it actually only cost us $24 million. Like, that's a great thing. And it's like, well,
Surplus isn't gonna exist. Somehow, every board is gonna have to come up with the funds that are gonna continue what is a necessary program in our schools. We have to provide meals to people who can't afford them.
Yep.
It has to happen. And another issue that references more the BRSU board, and that is we have to get appropriate salaries to hire special educators to take care of special education needs. And that seems to be increasing. What was it this year? 9.8%. We have to take care of these people. It's a federal mandate. We need to be able to appropriately fund that organization. And almost all of special education comes out of the BRSU budget.
yeah, but the special education budgeting, everybody remember Act 173, it's a whole new funding
The
structure.
login.
And I think what we're lucky for is that we've got a forward-thinking administration here in our districts that has, has planned ahead and made it work a lot. It's scary when you listen to some of the school board members at the VSBA, and you start hearing about, some of them are absolutely, they've been just slaughtered by special ed costs. And I think it's, they're kind of, okay, we changed this block grant thing and we've been decimated. And it's like, you did have a number of years to try to plan for this and try to figure out how to manage your program. And it can be painful, but at the same time, you've got to make some changes, I think, to the way you provide services. And I think, maybe we're just lucky here. I don't know, but I think a lot of it has to do with good management.
We try,
So,
but it's tough. It's tough to move a system, and it's tough to get people to think about doing the work differently, and we're no different than everybody else in that. But we will keep working on it.
okay. So this has been very helpful for me. Sorry to drag you guys through all this stuff, but, for taking things back to other people and all that. But,
I just wanted to say, like, way back to Dick's point about negotiations being tricky. I don't know that I necessarily all the way feel that way. I think we have a good group of staff. But my concern is when there's really negative language around education, it doesn't just impact us as boards doing the work. It actually really impacts the public perception of our teachers and staff, which makes their environment that they're in every single day that much harder, which puts us into a really tricky situation. So I think that is one thing that we really need to be aware of as we're talking and advocating with legislatures, that we are careful with our language, and that we really push them to be extremely careful with theirs as well.
good point.
Yep.
Agreed completely.
On the superintendent's report, going back to the very beginning, I'm hoping I'm allowed to ask this question, but we have the director of the facilities is retiring. Can you give us an overview of what that office looks like? How many employees are there, and how does the replacement affect the whole structure of that particular department?
I will try to answer it. You let me know if I'm getting at what you're asking.
Oh, okay.
So, Greg oversees all custodial staff and transportation. We have a director of transportation as well, who works under him and who primarily oversees transportation. But there's definitely overlap. So I don't know how many custodians do we have?
There's probably around 13 buildings and ground staff, and maybe another 7 or so drivers that are just drivers, maybe a little more. So maybe around 25 altogether, let's just say. That might be a little high.
So right now what's going on is, as I said, Adam started last Monday. Greg, as he transitions out over the next, 6 or 7 weeks, he's taking off a number of Mondays, Fridays, or both sometimes. So we've got a good rhythm, I think, of Adam working with Greg. And then on those days that Greg isn't here, Adam has the opportunity to be going out, meeting individually with people, spending time in the schools. And then they have the ability to talk things through. So they've heard from me that I feel very good about this transition. Adam and I have talked, and Greg and I have talked about, what this will look like, what I want for Adam when Greg leaves, sort of the skills, his knowledge and understanding of the system, that I want them to have a very open and trusting and transparent relationship as they go through this transition, so that Adam can be set up for the most success possible. So I think in general, they're building relationships, getting to know the work. We're getting Adam doesn't have a wastewater license, so we're contracting with somebody to do that. So just trying to, I think, just get as prepared as we can be for what's coming.
So the only person in the BRSU office that reports directly to Greg is the transportation person.
Well, and it's custodians as well.
Well,
Out in all the
Custodians,
they're out- they're
yes.
out in their
Yes.
various
Here, it's
areas.
just the two of them here in this
So-
office.
That whole transition, is that person part of that whole process?
Yes.
And okay with all, you know, I'm concerned about all of that, partly because I know the person and I'm just curious, but also the transportation system is pretty important to not have that too much disrupted with everything else being changed.
And Derek's still here.
Yeah.
So,
So it shouldn't
okay,
be.
okay, just curious.
And Greg is, I'm sure will be available even after, you know, like Greg is not, he's not moving out of the state or anything. And Greg is very agreeable to continue to support and answer questions.
Okay.
Okay, other,
Is
Question?
Adam willing, or is there funding available for him to get the certification that he would need for the wastewater?
Yeah, we're working through kind of, that would be part of what we talk about as we look at the work ahead of us, is what certifications do we want him to get that he doesn't currently have, and what's the sequence of those? We don't have it fully fleshed out yet. There are a number of things we'd like him to do, and I'm gonna meet with Greg and Adam in a few weeks, kind of midway through their transition period. That will be one of the things we talk about. So that's definitely a possibility. He doesn't have a CDL in Vermont either. That's a possibility. So you just have to figure out what makes the most sense to prioritize first.
other thoughts, questions? All right. Then, we're to the reflection on norms, which we didn't read them, but we will, next meeting, remember, we're gonna have a bit of a discussion on whether we like our norms or not. If anybody, we did wander a little today, that's all my fault, apologies.
We had enough time
Yep,
to consider these important future issues.
okay, public comment, I don't think we really have public. But, we do have a next meeting date to discuss.
Yes, and we didn't highlight that. I'm wondering if we could potentially move this meeting date.
June 24th.
Move it to when?
That's a good question. What night? Oh, I don't know. Well, maybe we were also talking about whether we needed one or not.
So I was gonna say, so what is
Yeah.
on the agenda
Yeah,
besides
that's-
norms?
Just be hiring. The week before, the only night I could do would be the 20th.
Actually, do you not really expect us to have much?
No,
Okay. We do have, we're kind of talking about some, talking to Randy about some topics to, outside of, the Taconic and Green actually, decided that, it made sense to do a little bit more board training sort of activities. And so they're picking up on the first item they're going to do is they're picking up on the session that we had quite some time ago on the Anchor and Rise programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the stuff we're, continuing to talk about, okay, what sort of education sessions do we have for the BRSU in the future, so that, that we could look down the road. We can do the norms, but we don't really have a whole lot that we probably can punt on a June meeting. I'm sure everybody's really upset about that. Yeah,
and if there's not much, Skylar can come on the 24th, we can keep it there and just do a quick meeting. But I cannot be there.
thoughts?
I'm in favor of not meeting if we don't need to.
Right. Okay, so for right now, it's penciled in, but with a likely drop to meeting.
As we get closer, it'd be nice to
Yes.
free up that.
Right, or just a quick.
Just consent agenda for hiring, like something quick.
Well,
Yeah, if it's,
That's the case.
if it were something like that, that it's a real quick meeting, then it could be just like Skylar and I could be here, you guys can all zoom in, do a 15-minute meeting, and then you're all home.
Yeah. Because we may sometimes.
Yeah.
We don't want to postpone them.
Also, yeah.
Okay, so that's even better than rescheduling. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Very good. I guess we need,
Move for adjournment.
is there a second? Julie, all in favor? Raise hands, say hi, whatever. Or say bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye, thank you.